You're in one of your regular meetings with your stakeholder group and you notice that the actions they've agreed to haven't been done. If they don't complete the actions, your change efforts aren't going to be successful, but you've spoken about them several times now and still nothing. How do you go about making sure the actions are taken when you've got no authority over the stakeholders involved? I'll go through why this happens and what you can do about it in this episode. Welcome back to the Applied Change Management Podcast. I'm Rose, and after more than a decade working in change management, I started this podcast to share practical lessons from the programs I've worked on. I've been in the situation I just described as well. It's quite typical when either you're quite new to change management or hold a more junior position, or you might have stakeholders that are way above your level in the organisation. Or it might be that you're a consultant, and although we can advise and support as consultants, we don't normally have the authority to demand anything from our stakeholders. It's difficult because you want to do a good job, and that job is dependent on your stakeholders actually doing the actions that they've agreed to. You can't instruct them because you're not a person of authority in the organisation, and you certainly can't control them. So what do? First, let's talk about why this happens. Now, apart from the difference in authority level, you're likely to be speaking with people who are really busy in their usual work and very probably are implementing other changes than yours as well. So your responsibility is to be very, very clear with them. Any ambiguity is going to cause you problems later. Think about the last time you struggled with this. What might have happened was that the actions sounded clear in the meetings, but actually later they weren't easily actionable. You might not have assigned real ownership of the actions, or it might have been a bit vague. We often don't define done well enough in meetings, so any progress is too subjective to track, leaving us feeling a bit adrift. We might not have explicitly explained what the consequences were of not carrying out the actions that were agreed on. So in the meeting, and also after the meeting where the actions are agreed, what actually happens is that the discussion carries on rather than the actions being taken to drive the outcome you need for your change efforts. What has worked well for me in the past is changing from listing the actions and agreeing to them in the meeting to being super clear on what they are, how they need to be done, and by when, and any consequences of not doing them. We can't have something like, can you review the new process and come back with feedback? It might sound reasonable in a meeting, but once someone leaves the room, they don't have clear guidance on what they're reviewing it for, what kind of feedback you wanted, how do they know that they're done, and who's doing it. If you ask for an action like that, it's either going to come back in the next meeting as something they need clarity on, or it might come back as, looks fine from my side. Well, that feedback isn't clear enough to move anything forward, because later down the implementation, something's going to come up that wasn't fine after all. What's worked for me is the sort of actions that are much more specific. Can you confirm whether your team can use this process as is, or send back any changes needed by Friday? Now we have a clear outcome. It either works for the team, or they'll let us know the changes that are needed for it to work for them. There's a clear scope here. It's for them and their teams to review this together. We also have a clear finishing point and timings. Can it be done by Friday? They know exactly what they need to do when they leave the meeting. Now, add to that the consequence if the action doesn't happen on time. If it's the one thing missing to reach the next milestone, call it out. Or maybe it's a foundational step that's being built on later and the stakeholder needs to know that. Either way, it has to be explicitly called out. Remember, they're busy. They need clarity. This way of doing things doesn't give you more authority, but what it does is to set up a collaboration between you and your stakeholders that's built on understanding. You're not telling them what to do, but you are making it super clear how they can do the actions the project needs them to do and why, and what happens if not. To underpin it, and to make sure you look like the organised professional you are, you'll have an action tracker in the meeting minutes. Whether it's transcribed by you, someone else, or AI, the point is you have an auditable track of what was agreed. Add into it how and why the action's needed, and you will be able to request actions from stakeholders who are your seniors in the organisation. Now, even if you do all that, there will still be situations where the action isn't taken. When that happens, the mistake I see quite often is that we go back to the discussion again. We re-explain it, we re-agree it, and then we end up in the same place. The thing is, it's not just an action anymore. There's very likely a blocker there that needs to be sorted. Either the person doesn't agree, they don't have the time, or they don't have enough clarity to move it forward. So instead of repeating the request for more action to be taken, you need to shift the conversation a bit. Bring it back to what was agreed, but then move straight into what's blocking it, not in a confrontational way, just very directly. Something along the lines of, we agreed this was going to be confirmed last week and it hasn't moved yet. Is there something blocking it from your side? Or is there something that we can help with to get this done by X time? That does two things. It makes it clear that the action hasn't progressed and that it's been noted, but it also gives some space to explain why. And once you understand the blocker, you can actually do something about it. If it's a capacity issue, you can reset timelines or involve someone else. If it's a lack of clarity, you can take the time to explain in more detail, probably offline, what's needed and why. If it's a disagreement, then you're into a decision rather than an action, and that needs to be handled differently. But at least you know what you're dealing with now and not just asking for the same action to be completed every week. The key takeaway here is that even if you don't have the authority, how you set actions up makes a big difference to whether they actually happen or not. If they're vague, they'll keep coming back into the conversation and you will end up chasing them. If they're clear, owned, and tied to something that matters, they're much more likely to move without you needing to push. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please like, follow, comment, and share it within your network. And come back next week for more applied change management topics. I'll see you there.